roads, but at the time there was no roads, right? They were using horses or the bulls to come to this place, so it was totally kind of impossible to reach that place. Outside of the church, if you notice, there was a castle, fortress, because fortress is always protecting the area, because we are always under the high risk of the attacks. Later we will talk about it. So that's why every place you go here, you will see a lot of the fortresses and the castles. We have 12.5 thousand churches in Georgia, which is quite a lot quantity for the country, whose territory is 69,700 square meters, which is a little bit bigger than Switzerland, but still one of the smallest country in the whole world. So we decided to be Christian even from first century, and imagine it's 21st century, and we still are, even though we had a lot of enemies during our lifetime. Later we will talk about in detail. Here in the churches you can see several icons, right? Icons, of course, are the real persons behind the icons. Saint George. Saint George is one of the main patron and savior saint for Georgia. Some people think that Georgia is named after the Saint George, but in real life is that, as you know, there are several ancient civilizations in the whole world. One of them is a Greek and the Greece, the kingdom. And when they came from there to here, they saw that Georgians were always working on land, so they were farmers. So they called us Georgia. Georgia means in their language a farmer. That's why it's called Georgia, but by the grammar of English pronunciation, it's Georgia. But in Georgian, also, our country name is not Georgia, this is Sakartvelo. It was called after 11th century, so Kartveli means Georgian in our language, and Sakartvelo means literally place for Georgian people. And even nowadays, approximately 90% of the population in Georgia is ethnically Georgians. The rest of them are several Armenian, Azerbaijani people, Jewish people, Ukrainian, and Russians. Okay. There you can see Saint Nicholas. So for some Catholics also. Correct. Once they were taking out the water, they will make it holy by the power of the Bible and the priest, and then they were baptizing the kids. So in our religion, after the kids are turning 40 days, we are baptize them. Very straight there is a jar, like stone, and we baptize kids over there. Beside of that fact is that we were always expecting the enemies to conquer us, to fight against us and so on. That's why outside was a castle to protect it. But Georgians were very wise and they had also the plan B. If the enemy would come here, they had secret tunnels over there and also down to the tunnel. It was tunnel system because if they would come inside, imagine just look next to these stones. You just don't see anything, right? It was the same. If the enemy would come inside, they would climb up. That now it's covered by wooden door, but that time it was camouflaged with a stone. They would climb up, put stone from inside to outside, and the enemy would not have any idea there would be some holes inside. That's how they were surviving, otherwise the enemy would kill them. So as you observe, the walls where we are is very thick, right? And as I mentioned, this is 11th century church. And so there we saw before down, as I mentioned, there's a king, Heracles II, right? With a shield and a sword. So he's from 18th century. He was very important king for us because in his reign time, Georgia got a little bit weaker. Before we were always one of the smallest but very strong kingdom. So he was sending ambassadors to European kingdoms to ask help, but they were always betrayed and they were always killed. So they never delivered the message from a king. That's why first time in our history, Heracles II asked help to Russia Empire. Never before. 1783, they made agreement that Russia should have protected Georgia, send troops if it was necessary, and never involved in the politics. But after a few years, I'm making sure Russians never keep their word. Russia annexed Georgia instead of protection. So beginning of 19th century, so 1801, this is first time when Russia annexed Georgia. It lasted until the end of the First World War ending. So 1918, First World War ended, we got independence. But it lasts only 3 years because 1921 Soviet Union created and Georgia and the other 14 countries, so 15 countries were annexed and occupied again, and it lasted 70 years. So from 1921 until 1991. All right. During this time, not the whole 70 years, but there was a time when Russians, the authorities were prohibited us to speak in our own language, even though there was literally swamp territory where the Russia exists and we exist as a kingdom already. And imagine they prohibit us to speak in our own language, which is unique language, Georgian language, and they went inside our churches and they whitewashed our walls. And as you see, our walls, in old times, it was even much more frescoes. The frescoes disappeared and vanished. And the frescoes, as you know, are very holy for us because it's expression of the biblical stories, Jesus' life and so on. And it's also very hard working and took a lot of years to cover the whole walls. And they were atheists, which means that they did not believe in God. They went inside our churches, whitewashed it. Sometimes even this specific church, they imagine they even bombed it. They converted our churches into storage for guns, nursery schools, hospitals, and just for living. So they were disrespecting our religion.
From 21 to 91?
From 21 to 91 was the Soviet, but at the beginning they were doing this one. That's why don't be surprised when you meet Georgians, like especially middle-aged and older, they don't speak English because they stopped us to develop. Otherwise, we would be one of the leader European kingdom in all times in country nowadays. But we are eager to join. That's why 2 months ago we just got candidate status of European Union, and soon we will join. That's why younger people, they do speak English, but middle-aged and olders, all of them, they speak Russian because at school they learned Georgian and in Russia.
Basically, Georgia will become the Schengen country, part of Schengen.
We are already several years, I think approximately 10 years. Okay. So we don't need visa to go to European countries. Okay. So we are in Schengen zone, okay, but we are not in European Union. That's to a different statement. Okay, she was as influencer all the other kings before. She maintained all the territories which we had in 13th century, and Georgians were 12 million by that time. That Georgian nation made exception, and we call her not the Queen Tamar but the King Tamar. when the Western European countries or US is reminding people about equality between female and male, which is quite good, we Georges are smiling because in 13th century the head of the kingdom was female, not a man, so it was even opposite. The females generally, that's why in Georgia the woman cult is very important. That's why mothers, sisters, grandmothers are very respected, and they are very well respected. That's why